Sharon Fisher with Idaho Business Week. Well, first off, welcome to our post State of the State press event. I miss seeing your smiling faces, but Sharon, go ahead. Are you there?
No, not you. Not me. Hold on.
All right, I will manually unmute and do it that way. All right.
Okay,
Governor
Sharon.
Otter tried to raise money for transportation funding a few years ago by raising user fees, and he wasn't really able to do it. And the legislature now is arguably more conservative than it is then. How do you think you're going to be able to pass it when Governor Otter couldn't?
Well, as I stated, I didn't do this in a vacuum. We had conversations last year. We had conversations during the interim, and Governor Otter and for a matter of fact myself, we're all dedicated. The Legislative Transportation Committee, they want to put some general fund into it. So this proposal will be half general fund and half dedicated. But we've done a lot of groundwork on it. I believe it's, I believe it's got a really good chance of getting across the finish line, and I'm very dedicated to it.
We'll go to Scott Logan.
Scott Logan.
Governor, sir, how are you?
Good.
What is the fallback plan should the final lap, as you call it, in the race against COVID take longer than expected? If the COVID situation doesn't wrap up in the time frame that you're looking at, how would that affect the tax relief plan, and what kind of contingency planning have you got?
Good question, Scott. There's the economic side of COVID, and then there's the health side of COVID, and both of them could be a risk. The faster we can get our vaccine rolled out, the more people do the right things from a health standpoint. The more they do that, the better we'll be able to get through it, and our economy will rebound. So it's dependent upon how much vaccine we get into the state. It depends on what the spread is of the new variant variety, and because if that comes in, that complicates a lot of things, because that means the spread will be faster. You know, we fully intend to have all our kids back in school, but there's a lot of variables out there. But I believe if we get the vaccine rolled out on the schedule we want, by June, we should be having the much lower risk part of our population being vaccinated.
Thank you, sir.
James Dawson.
James Dawson.
Hey, Governor. Since you mentioned in your speech you condemned the violence at the Capitol last week, by signing on to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's failed lawsuit to overturn the votes of millions of people in other states that was based on debunked conspiracy theory, do you feel any kind of responsibility in legitimizing those views that kind of helped fuel that last week's violent insurrection at the Capitol?
No.
Why not?
I mean, the question is the election process. You know, as I said, even in my speech today, every state has a responsibility to make sure that the voters in their district, in their states, and all the rest of the voters are not disenfranchised. I applauded the legislature just a little bit ago about what we did to make sure our votes were counted, to make sure people had access to the polls. And that was one of the ancillary parts of that lawsuit. And there is going to be a lot of election, as there is every year, every 2 years. There'll be a lot of election legislation that takes place. Each state needs to take responsibility for the sanctity of the vote in their states. Melissa Davlin.
Hi, Governor Little. Thank you so much. I'm curious about your nod to what would happen if Idaho were to end the emergency declaration. And we know that it would affect FEMA dollars. We also know that there are many lawmakers who are looking to end the emergency as soon as possible and to curb your executive authority and your ability to declare these emergencies in an ongoing way. If a bill lands on your desk that would end the emergency, will you veto it?
Well, it depends upon what the bill says. As I stated earlier, every state in the union is still under an emergency order. So there's a reason, and there's no question we have an emergency. I mean, look at the coverage that all of you spent a lot of time talking about. This is a big issue. Now, there could be different variations, and I've had some discussions with them. I look forward to a full, robust discussion about what we do on emergency orders, how long they stay on the books, what it takes, and we'll just have to see. But that's not my priority. I'm trying to keep people safe. I'm trying to go through the initiatives in building Idaho's future, get money put into education so these kids don't fall in the gap. That's what I'm concentrated on at the beginning of this session.
To Bill Spence.
Thank you.
Bill Spence. Hi, Bill.
Sorry, taking a while to get technology where it needs to be. Thank you, Governor. I guess two questions. One to start out with is talking with Alex Adams this morning. He indicated that your transportation proposal is kind of a shift from past administrations where they have strongly resisted any use of general fund for transportation, and you're at least opening the door to some use of general fund. I seem to remember in past years you being part of the crowd that very much resisted general fund for transportation. Why the switch?
Well, it's very important to me, and I want to get it across the finish line. B, I've had discussions with members of the Transportation Committee, leadership, other legislators about it. You were right that my position has been it should be funded from a source of revenue that we know that is predictable. Our revenue stream is way up, and some of the proposals are to divert sales tax. But I think this is a good compromise, and most importantly, I think it's something we can get done, and that's why I'm more than excited to work with the legislature on that part of building Idaho's future, along with the one-time money we're going to put into it with the surplus we have this year. Did I miss anything, Alex? Alex is here if you got tough questions.
The second question then is refers to your proposal on tax relief. Clarify for me what you're doing with the money that's what you're proposing to do with the money that's in the tax relief fund. If I understood Alex, you're proposing to use the current balance for one-time tax relief, but you're also proposing to obligate a portion of that for ongoing tax relief. Clarify that for me.
You got it right, Bill. Is that right, Alex? Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just fundamental good budgeting. The one time goes into one time and ongoing goes into ongoing. That's how you have a sustainable plan. And if something happens, you're prepared for the future. There's a lot of states right now that are really having issues balancing one time with ongoing, and we're not going to do that in Idaho.
So how much of it are you proposing to obligate for ongoing tax relief?
Because the sales tax, for those of you that aren't policy people, our sales tax receipts, the online sales tax receipts went way up this year. We all know because more people were buying online. We took a conservative number and said, this is going to be the ongoing Wayfair money, and it's going to go into tax relief. Did I miss anything, Alex?
Yeah. So the amount that we believe is going to be ongoing into the tax relief fund is $105 million. So the governor is proposing to use that $105 million as ongoing tax relief. He set aside $160 million of ongoing tax relief in his budget, 105 of which would be drawn from the tax relief fund.
And where's the other $55 million come from?
Just growth in the economy.
Scott.
Okay, thank you.
Scott McIntosh. Hi, Scott. Are you unmuted, Scott?
The space bar wasn't working. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, Governor. I appreciate it. What were the considerations or the metrics that you used that went into the decision to balance tax cuts with putting more money into, for example, K-12 education?
Well, I mean, it's all a conservative budgeting to make sure, as I just stated previously, that we balanced ongoing with what we know is going to be consistent revenue. You know, the K-12 system, we redoubled down on our $250 million career ladder money. We're going to put some new money into literacy, or we're going to propose it to the legislature and work darn hard to get it across the finish line to address the deficiencies that happened because kids were out of school last spring, plus the in and out that's taken place in some districts. But as I stated, we put 16% more money into public education than we did last year. Now, some of that, for granted, is for safety protocols, but public education is still my top priority.
And as a follow-up, does that your K-12 budget include money that is anticipated for the potential use toward private education funds for either vouchers or education savings account, increased funding for use of private education?
No.
Oh, okay.
Logan Finney.
Logan.
Hi there, Governor. I had a question on vaccine rollout. Is any of the spending of the surplus, the budget surplus, supposed to go to in-state logistics with deploying the vaccination timeline, or are those efforts coming from other funding sources? Well,
I'm going to make an announcement tomorrow predicated on the advice that I got from my Corona vaccine committee Friday. We have some money in emergency funds that are available to us that we fully intend to use for vaccine. We're getting mixed signals from the federal government about how much of the new CARES bill is going to be available, and whatever that is, it'll be. But we are not going to let resources be any kind of a detriment or anything to slow down the rollout of vaccines. So we're going to get the vaccine out because we are very blessed that we've got a good, strong financial position. We will put the resources into it necessary to get the vaccine out.
So just to clarify, it'll be mainly state resources and then federal resources as they become available?
There will be federal there's some federal resources. Alex, do you want to talk about what they did there?
So on Friday, we got a notification from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that we have at least $16 million coming in for vaccine distribution costs. Those dollars should be available to us this month. As the governor said, we will not let resources be the constraint to getting the vaccines out. We've talked about the resources that are available to us in the governor's emergency fund and the disaster emergency account. We'll deploy all resources necessary, but there's $16 million minimum that's coming in as of notification to us last Friday.
Thank you.
Clark Corbin.
Clark.
Hi, Governor. Clark Corbin with Idaho Education News. Thanks so much for doing this event today with the press corps. I wanted to follow up on Scott's question just a little bit and ask if you're a K-12 teacher, and if this school year you were frozen on the career ladder, what can you expect for 2022?
Well, movement on the career ladder is not precluded. Alex?
So the governor's approach to this budget was making the K-12 budget whole. So it would fully restore in fiscal year 22, and then he layers maintenance growth on top of that, specifically the build out of the career ladder. So any teacher that would have moved this year moves, and then they move again in fiscal year 22. So if you were somebody who would have moved into the advanced professional rung this year, you'd be in the advanced professional rung cell 2 next year. So it fully gets the $250 million career ladder implemented. I feel pretty confident saying we're probably one of the only states that can make that record of an investment in our teachers in the middle of a global pandemic.
Kevin Richard.
Governor, you spent a lot of time in the State of the State talking about kind of life after coronavirus, governing after coronavirus, and you laid out a lot of big ticket items, big tax relief, big investment in transportation, reinvestment back in education and the career ladder. How much of this is pivoting away from governing during a pandemic, and how much of it is pivoting towards election next year?
Well, as I stated a couple times in my State of the State, our ability to have the flexibility to build Idaho's future, to do the things that we're doing, is a result of what we did even before the pandemic and what we've done ever since. It's startling to me that we have a record surplus over our projections pre-pandemic. And so that's the reward for being prudent, for doing the right thing, is your ability to do things into the future, to strategically invest in things that are going to make Idahoans' lives better, whether it be education, transportation, healthcare, fill in the blank of what's there. But these are a result of us being prudent in the past, and the fact that we've got, despite COVID, we've got incredible growth going on in Idaho. We're by most measurements, the #1 growing state in the union, and all the hard work that Idahoans done, the sacrifices they made to keep our case rate down, should be rewarded in either giving them money back to the taxpayers or investments in those critical things. So that's just a result of what we've done in the last year or 2 years.
How much does re-election, the prospect of re-election, drive your agenda this year?
It's a long time till re-election.
Back to Jimmy.
James Dawson.
Yeah, Governor, can you talk a little bit more about this broadband grant program? Would the $35 million go toward, internet service providers trying to build out their networks, or are we talking about, helping people who are, far and far away from the nearest town, and maybe they have to get satellite internet, and very special cases like that? What does it look like?
Well, James, it's as we did the CARES dollars, and the CARES dollars had a real finite amount of time, and unfortunately there were so many states that were doing it. There was not enough fiber, not enough contractors, not enough equipment. But when we got that deployed, and there were a few municipalities that didn't get, I think 16 or something, that didn't get their funding, but now we're going to know where our weak links are. If we extend it out to the edge of a community, and there's another community on the other side of it, now we can use that fiber, that backbone that went into that first community, to go to the second one. And we can take a deep breath and more prudently bid it, more prudently implement it. We're going to have a map. We're working on mapping, which is always kind of voodoo in the broadband area, because everybody's got a different map. We're trying to identify rural communities that really have a fundamental lack of access, and we'll put that $35 million in there to boost our already $50 million investment.
Bill Spence again.
Bill.
Thank you, Governor. I thought I knew the answer to this, but then Alex's comments on making sure that resources don't limit you on vaccination made me wonder. At the beginning of the pandemic, you borrowed $39 million from the tax relief fund, basically to make sure that you had money, and the expectation was that was going to be backfilled by the federal government. I don't think that has been repaid to the tax relief fund yet. Will it definitely be repaid, or does it still depend upon priorities?
I know I didn't spend it. Alex will tell you where it is.
So, Bill, a lot of our COVID expenses are being paid out of the disaster emergency account. That's where we had moved the 39.3 million to. So what's being paid out of there? The National Guard expenses are being paid out of there. The PPE that the military division is providing to hospitals, specifically the critical access hospitals throughout the state. A lot of the work at the Office of Emergency Management is being paid out of there, and potentially some of the work of vaccines, depending on how quickly the federal dollars arrive. So I think, as the governor said when he signed that executive order last March, the intention is to put it back. The question is how quickly, because we're still closing out quite a few expenses. It takes a while to settle with FEMA, the National Guard costs and the PPE costs and other things like that. So we did build in $180 million from the tax relief fund. If, Bill, your question is ultimately, is that $180 million predicated on that 39 million being back? It does not appear so based on the trajectory. We're going to announce tomorrow our December revenue numbers, and there's another $12 million coming to the tax relief fund for just that month alone. It turns out Idahoans like their online sales. It's possible we will get the 180 regardless of if that 39's back, in which case I think it would be prudent and perhaps wise to make that transfer back in fiscal year 22 after we've cost settled with FEMA, after we've closed out all of our COVID expenses, so that we have the ability to respond quickly to an ongoing and evolving emergency.
Thank you.
Hi there, Alex. You just mentioned the $16 million coming for vaccination. Is that part of the $37.8 million for vaccination that's coming out of the new stimulus package, or is it in addition to?
So, Katie, just to make sure, 16.16. I couldn't tell if you said 16 or 60.
I said 60. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is part of what we believe to be $38 million coming for vaccines. So both the U.S. Senate and FFIS, the Federal Funds Inventory of State, estimate that Idaho's on pace to get 38 million. We were a little surprised by the 16 number that we heard last Friday, but it turns out, or what my understanding is now, is that CDC had to get a portion of it out within 30 days, and then the next tranche would come after 30 days. So I believe we're still on par to get 38 million, but 16 is what's being made immediately available. To the governor's point, he doesn't want resources to be the constraint to us getting the vaccines out, and that's why we're prepared to use any of the emergency accounts necessary to get shots in the arm as quickly as possible. The governor had a call with some of the pharmacy chains on Friday, and I think both of them are on pace to get the vaccines to each of their targeted long-term care facilities by the end of this month.
Okay, thank you.
Who's that? Hey, Logan.
Hi there, Governor. I'd like to go back to the transportation topic real quick. Last year, one of the bills legislature that received your veto was a proposal that would have increased the portion of funding that comes from the general fund distribution into the transportation mitigation fund from 1% to 2%. I remember in your veto letter, you had cited concerns about revenue because of the coronavirus pandemic. And now that we know, the state is facing quite a substantial surplus, would you expect the legislature to pass another version of that bill again? And if they did, would you approve it, or are you expecting something completely different in the transportation realm?
Well, Logan, I'll let Andrew or let Alex talk about the details of it, but that's you just make a point about what we were doing pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, and that was preparing. That we didn't know the magnitude, we didn't know how Idahoans were going to react, we didn't know what the economy was going to do, so we were taking every precaution. That's why we put money away into that disaster relief fund. The net of all this is because of the incredible growth we've had in Idaho, we got a lot more flexibility than we had before, and that's part of the reason that I proposed the transportation plan. Do you want to talk about that exact?
Sure. So I think the key line of the governor's state of the state is when he calls for a blended approach. He says, let's work towards a package that blends both general fund and user fees. As as he's described today. General fund alone is pretty unstable, and when there's a competition between K-12, public safety, and roads, usually loses, which is why it needs to be a mix of both general fund and user fee. The bill that you just described was 100% general fund, and it came to his desk at a time in which most states' economies appeared to be in free fall. Idaho has rebounded, and I think that goes back to the question Sharon perhaps started us with. What makes this different than past efforts? I think there's just this rare window of opportunity. We have record low interest rates. You have low gas prices relative to where we've been. You have a legislature that just 2 years ago passed a bonding mechanism to bond for transportation that would help with both congestion and mitigation. So it just seems like that, plus the strong economic position we're in, sets up the ingredients for success. And the blended approach of general fund and user fees, with the user fees offset by ongoing tax relief, a magnitude of 2 to 1 in cuts, just makes this seem like a ripe opportunity.
Governor, we'll close out with Melissa Davlin.
Melissa Davlin. Last question.
Hey, Governor Little, thank you so much. With the incoming Biden administration and also Democrats controlling both the House and the Senate, how does that change your approach to your budget and policy priorities that you're pursuing this year?
It shouldn't make any difference in our priorities. We obviously, I've spent 4 years, the last 2 years, building a relationship with the current administration, and we'll roll up our sleeves and go to work building a relationship with the new ones. But this is all sustainable. Idaho's really an outlier in my calls with other governors, and the fact that whether it's getting out vaccine, whether it's what we're doing on broadband, whether it's what we're doing on transportation, that because of the fundamental conservative budgeting that we've done in Idaho and the fundamental growth, we're able to go forward without. Now we'll take the help from the federal government, but we can make it on our own with our strong economy. So with that, thank you all very much, and I appreciate your questions.